Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be working with some clay. I'm going to be pitching our first clay project at you. If you haven't collected I've got a little individually bagged 3-pound blocks of clay. Those are available just inside the front doors. There's a cart of them. They're on the bottom in clay boxes. Today we are going to start creating our little clay creature. Now, I want to go over the requirements, show you some examples, and then start working together with clay. I'm going to show you kind of what I've got setup-wise here as far as materials and how I'm managing this, and give you some tips as how far to manage your clay at home. Remember that we always want to store our clay well. That means that we are leaving it bagged, ideally with something with a little bit of moisture in that. We'll talk about that again towards the end. Your clay should never just be sitting out, because if you leave that out, it's going to move towards that bone dry stage and will not be workable, and then you'll have to reprocess that. And if we were here in the building, I would have a spot that we could reprocess that in a bucket. But if you're at home and this is all you've got, then we got to make sure that we are taking care of our clay. So our little clay creature, the requirements on this are going to be pretty open-ended, so that way you are free to take this any direction you want to go. But you need at least 3 appendages on your creature. You need at least 3 textures on your creature. And then it needs to be either freestanding or sitting or somehow designed with it existing on its own in mind. So I want to show you a couple examples. I've got some student examples from the past here. We've got this guy, which has little feet, legs on him, and these little like eyeball-y things and a mouth. And then I really want to draw your attention to the textures that are carved in the back, but then especially along this body. And that picked up some of the glaze in interesting ways there. This little turtle bunny guy with a crystal ball, you can see really well the textures both on the head, but then especially on that back. And as I talk about textures, texture is a huge part of working with clay, because we have the ability to control, like physically control all of those elements of how this thing looks and exists. So we've got this little like Weasley looking guy who has this really richly textured, I'd come around and let you guys actually touch that tail. It's pointy there. These 3 are all glazed, which depending on our time in the building, you should have time to do. This is a little painted bunny bear with a little blanket that goes along with it. And so that's painted just with acrylic clay. And then last I'll show you is one of my favorites here, which is a sad toast centaur type guy. So we've got textures on the back. We got a piece of sad toast there on the front. So as we start working with clay, a couple things to keep in mind is you need to keep your clay wet. You need to kind of control the moisture of that. And then I would recommend designating some tools. So I always use, where did I set that? I always use a needle tool or have something similar to this. In the art room, the needle tool is just this little pointy guy. I also have some fancier ones with a couple different tools, so that way I can switch back and forth between things in real time. For you, if you don't have a needle tool or anything that could function that way, if you sharpen a pencil and designate that as your clay pencil, you can use that to both poke holes and score into the clay. I mentioned scoring, we'll talk about that. I have a fancy scoring tool, but if you have forks or butter knives or anything along those lines, you can work with whatever you have. I have an old dull butter knife here. And then I've got something that is going to function as like a smaller finger for me. And so this has like a little curved beveled edge and then a flat edge there. Again, if you don't have anything like this, if you take a pencil, you can have the pointy end, and then if you just like cut a little bit of that off, you can round that out so that way you've got a nice smooth end on the back. So those are the tools that I use. Beyond that, I have a clay board, which if you're working at home, I recommend making. All I have with this clay board is it is a hard board, or like a piece of cardboard, and then a plastic bag taped over that, so that way you've got a nice surface that it's okay to like get clay on that doesn't need a ton of cleanup afterwards. I always have my clay board. I keep paper towel around, and then I keep a cup of water nearby. And this water I actually just turn into my slip at the end of each period. And so if you glance inside, it is kind of like gross and like clay. And so my clay water is part of what I use for my project. And then I always need my block of clay. So for our little clay creature, we are doing a little thing, right? So we do not need the entire block of clay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by taking a little bit of this off. Notice that I've taken most of my like rings or bracelets or things off because I just, when I'm working with clay, it is easier to keep those clean and then put them back on when my hands are clean at the end. So I'm keeping my bag aside, and I'm going to start off just by taking a chunk of this. Now you could take one of your like cutty tools and cut it. You can also, I really like just with this first block of clay, just pinch and tear some of it off. The reason that I like you guys being able to tear that off is because it really gets into your head how you can, like you are in charge of what this block of clay becomes. And so I'm going to tear it into a couple smaller pieces. And as far as this project, we can create whatever we want. So if you've created some of those little creatures and you want, or those characters throughout the semester, and you want to build one of them, then start building them. When working, we want to work from big to small. So notice that I'm not coming in and I'm not adding any like textures to this yet. I'm trying to get the basic shape down for what I'm going for. And I don't even know what I'm going for yet. I'm just seeing what happens with it. And so I'm working big shapes to small. Now, I got this little, I don't know, looks kind of like a torso to me. I'm going to set that there, and I'm going to make a leg for it. So maybe I'm trying to make one of those like characters that I designed. With clay, in general, there's what I call like the hang 10 rule. You don't want your clay to be much thinner than your pinky, because if it's thinner than your pinky, it's going to be fragile and it's going to start breaking. And if it's thicker than your thumb, then you're running the risk of it drying in a funny way and then not like surviving that kiln firing process. Quick refresh, we've got our clay in the plastic stage where it's this dark gray. When it gets bone dry, it gets to be this light gray. This is the same type of clay. And then when we fire it, it fires out to this like nice white. So this is all the same clay in my hand here in 3 different stages. So maybe I'm working this leg, and I'm not going to worry too much about this because I need to attach this piece of clay to this. Now, some of you at this point might say, oh, Mr. Reynolds, that's really easy because I can just go like that and boom, it's attached. However, the only thing holding this together right now is water, and as this dries, that water's going to dry, and that's just going to fall apart. So what we need to do is we need to convince this clay that it has always been just one piece of clay. And for that, I'm going to get my scoring tool, or my sharpened pencil, or my needle tool, or whatever you have. We're going to rough this up. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to score this, which scoring just means like cutting into the clay. You can see my scoring marks there. I cut into it kind of both directions, but really scoring it is just roughing up that clay. I'm going to score both ends of where I'm joining this clay, so both pieces of clay. I'm roughing that up. We have this process called score and slip. So I'm going to write that on the board behind me. Score, like you're scoring a goal. Score and slip. Now, score and slip means that you are cutting into it, you are roughing it up, and then you're using slip to join those two together. Now, you might not have any slip or slurry yet. You might just have water, and that's fine. I'm going to reach down in here, and this is going to be kind of gross. This is my slip. This is the same type of clay as this, which is the same type of clay as this. Different water contents. So I'm going to apply some slip to this, and slip is going to act as like a clay concrete. So once I've slipped that up, I'm going to take that and I'm going to press those two pieces together. And then this is super important. I'm going to smooth that edge, so that way these two pieces of clay believe that they were always one single piece of clay. So I'm pressing that together, I'm smoothing that out, so that way these two pieces of clay always believed that they were one piece of clay. Now, I can play around with this however I want. I'm thinking of making this person kind of like sitting. Now that I look at this, my anatomy is a little bit off, so maybe I'm coming in and I need to like carve a butt, so that way these legs are coming out and sticking in kind of two different directions. So I'll start that butt right here. Now I'm ready for another piece. So you notice how physical, how tactile this process is. I'm going to keep working this. If you have questions, come to Open Studios and I can physically demonstrate what I'm doing. I can look at what you're doing and help give you pointers on like, don't do that, do more of this. Really, we want to be making the most of our time here. Your goal should be, I would say by the end of the week, but honestly, if you're working on this, feel free to work on it through Thanksgiving break. If you come back at the end of Thanksgiving break, when we do move into hybrid mode with one of these little creatures ready to be fired, I would be 100% delighted. So I scored it, I slipped it, I'm smoothing it together while pressing it. So if I want to join two pieces of clay together, I always need to score and slip. Now, also notice that I'm not worrying about details on this yet. I'm not even worrying about like getting it precise. I can trim this off. I can pinch that off. I can add more clay to that. I can do whatever I want because I am the ceramicist or the potter in this case. So I'm starting to craft this person. And oftentimes I'll do like a smaller clay board as well, so that way I can move, like I've got these dangly legs that are kind of sensitive. And so I can show you how this is taking shape. It's still gnarly, it's still kind of a golem looking thing, but I want you to start getting used to just managing, handling, working with that clay, joining clay together, and then I'll come back probably tomorrow, record a video where I talk specifically about adding texture to a finished product, but texture is something that we are 100% not worrying about until after we have our basics down. So, if you've been watching this whole video waiting to grab your clay, turn me off, go grab clay, start working on it. If you have questions, come to Open Studio, and I look forward to seeing what you all create. Bye-bye. I know I just said bye, but I'm going to keep working because my hands are dirty, and I don't necessarily want to touch my computer with my clay hands. So I'm going to attach this other piece. If you're still with me, I'll give you a little bonus thing at the end here and show you how I would wrap this up. So I'm trying to give this person a nice realistic bend here. Got an arm kind of coming out from behind. All right, bonus, storage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same paper towel. It's gnarly already. I'm going to get it a little bit wet, and I'm going to squeeze any of that extra moisture out. Really, you just want this damp, but not dripping wet. And I'm going to lightly drape this over the top of my creature, my thing that I'm designing there. And I'm going to take that bag again, and I'm going to take this little clay board that I prepared, and I'm going to slide it in that bag. And I want to really cut off as much moisture to this as I can. So I'm going to wrap this underneath, and I'm going to put this in a secure place where no one is going to touch it. If you've got mom or dad around, make sure that they're not touching that, little brother, little sister. And then I'm going to bag this clay separate. And so this is my unused clay. I'm going to just wedge this all back together. And so that just means I'm going to press that back together as if it were one thing. Let me get this paper towel wet. And I need another bag to store this. I have a lot of kids who will start like washing their hands before they pack up their clay when we're in the classroom. That's not a smart move. You gotta get all the way cleaned up before you bother washing your hands. So, I have my clay tools here. I have my designated water cup, my designated fork or butter knife or whatever you're using. I'm gonna keep all this just together right here. And then when we come back, I will pick up and we'll look at this again. But go create.